Hey everyone, it is Grant Winsauer and
Jack Rody.
back here on the Bear Claw cast. Jack is back to full health after missing Saturday, so I'm glad to have him back on here for this. But we have a lot to talk about. First we're gonna recap the uh, Bears' terrible loss, 38-13 to the
Do we have to?
49ers.
Do we have
Um,
to?
Sadly, yes, we have to. We will also talk about how, in our personal opinions, Thomas Brown failed his audition to become the full-time head coach of the Chicago Bears. Um, we will also be discussing Bears fans calling for Ryan Poles' head, uh, and if we see them actually clean house uh, for the new head coach. And then we will also be giving our MVP and Coach of the Year predictions, and then we will end discussing how many head coaching jobs will be open at the beginning of the offseason. So before we get into that, how have you been, Jack?
I've been good. It's getting down to time to start focusing on finals and stuff. So that's coming up next week for me, which won't be the most fun. But I was hoping the Bears would give me a little bit of a fun distraction with the new head coach in town, and they did not do that yesterday. So it's unfortunate, but looking forward to talking about it with you today.
Yes, and we'll discuss off camera what when we'll figure out to do the podcast for next week. I don't know why I said that on camera. I just felt like it. Um. Okay, so let's get into it. In a game that honestly was supposed to be a fresh start, and everyone thought the Bears would play violent, they certainly did not. Brock Purdy had 250 plus passing yards in the first half. That is usually what QBs get in the game, not the first half. So that is bad. Now I understand why Matt Eberflus was calling the defense. Uh, what I don't understand is uh, why are the Chicago Bears a second half only team? Now, let us be clear. The second half did not go much better than the first half, but we scored at least. Caleb Williams completed 17 out of 23 passes for 134 passing yards and 2 passing touchdowns. Um, the completions and the passing touchdowns were great, but the passing yards were quite a letdown for how depleted the 49ers defense was. Both of the touchdowns went to rookie Roma Dunze, and their connection has been growing week by week. Fans should be excited that they have this duo for the next 4 years and hopefully beyond. But uh, what were your reactions to yesterday's game? It was just terrible.
Yeah, I mean, there's so much to say and also so little to say. Uh, like you alluded to, another game where the Bears just have zero offense to start the game. I think we had one first down last week at halftime against the Lions, and we
Uh
had
huh.
what, like 2 yards of total offense towards
Mm-hmm.
the end of the first half of this game. And don't get me wrong, I've been really excited with what Caleb Williams has been able to put together the second half of games the last couple of weeks. But um, this is something that clearly needs to be addressed, among other things, with this team is how we get out to starts. And the other games, I was happy with Caleb's performance, and we were able to come back in the game, and it seemed a little bit more meaningful. But as much as I love to see Caleb be successful, his stats in the second half of this game were against all prevent defensive coverages, and the Niners were healthily ahead for that entire second half. But I mean, like you mentioned, the Niners, like Nick Bosa's not in this game, and their backup defensive end, who has 1 sack all year, gets 3 sacks against the Bears' offensive line. And it just, I mean, my roommate and I were sitting watching the game, and the one thing that we kept saying is every drive just felt like a repeat of each other. Whether, like, no matter how we started, we always got to about third and 7 to 10 yards, and pass protection just did not hold. Whether it was pass protection not holding up or the receivers just not getting open, every single time it seemed like it resulted in a Caleb Williams sack, and it was just super frustrating to watch.
Yep, and that's why this offseason, no matter how much salary cap we have, which right now is actually slated at around $80 million, and that's before the salary cap goes up, because it always seems to go up every year. So I mean, we could still have $100 million to spend on quality free agents. That's why I think at least 60 to 65% of it's got to be invested in uh, rebuilding this O line. I mean, especially the interior of this O line, with the guards being probably guards and center being the most important. I mean, I like what I've seen from Braxton Jones, but he.
I was just reading a tweet before we got on the podcast talking about how Braxton Jones is probably a average starting left
Mhm.
tackle in the NFL, which is fine to have on your team when he's like your fourth or fifth best lineman, but he's like our
Our
second
second.
best and at times our best when Darnell's not having a good game. So it's just not enough talent along that offensive line.
See, that's why when you look at, okay, so right now, if the season were to end today, the Bears would be slotted to pick at ninth overall, the same as last year. Um, and now I don't know how we don't know how the draft is going to play out, because it's in 4 months, or like 5 months technically. But I mean, if we could get one of the top tackles, in like Will Campbell,
Yeah,
or
Kevin Banks from Texas
yeah,
is the other name I was going to
one of
mention.
those two. Personally, I believe. Well, okay, so regardless of how terrible this QB class is, uh, maybe not one. One I believe will be Travis Hunter, just because of how he's played. I mean, and he plays both ways. Now, I don't think he will play both ways in the NFL, but his seasons have warranted him, number one. But
And
two,
I think Shadur and Cam Ward are also locks to go within before our pick
top
at nine.
five.
Yeah, like top five to top seven. I think those guys are locks to go
So
there.
that's three picks, and if I could, damn, can I pull up the draft order? I
And
don't, I
I
don't think
know
you.
I know Tetaroa McMillan is most likely going to go ahead of us.
Right, right,
We've seen in recent years. I know like a lot of the talk right now is Ashton Genty to the Cowboys, but we've seen these elite running back prospects in recent years go a little bit higher than people expected. Like Bijan at 7 to the Falcons, at
right.
8 to the Falcons was a little bit of a surprise to people. So I wouldn't be shocked if he goes off in the college football playoff if he sneaks in front of us as well and gives us
Now,
another
now,
option.
actually, let me ask you this question. So, we've talked about it multiple times, and everyone, wants Ben Johnson to become our next head coach. And, well, it looks like that is most likely the course of action. Well, we're saying that way too early. Let me just say that, but that's what we're hoping. Um, so he runs that two-headed monster in Detroit, and you have Swift, but if Ben Johnson is our head coach and pushes for Genty, what would your reaction be if that is the course of action that we took?
Um, I don't particularly think he would, just because the Lions already like they spent a first round pick on Sewell the year before, maybe the year prior to that, and they had their offensive line in place. And I think
Okay, see, I
for
forgot about that. So
yeah, for
thank
as
you.
good as those two backs are in Detroit, and I think they'd be good no matter what team they're on. At least part of their success, obviously, is hingent upon the fact
Their
that
offensive
Detroit's
line.
offensive line is the best in the NFL. So
Yeah, and I mean, don't get me wrong. I mean, the dude Genty is awesome. I mean,
mhm.
I mean, he's the college football playoffs of or college football version of Saquon right now. I mean, Saquon is probably going to break um, Barry Sanders, or no, not Eric Dickerson's all-time rushing record in one season, and we will actually. I'll get into that a little later. But I mean, I'm with you. I drafted tackles first. I would. I mean, you could actually probably get a decent running back option later in the draft anyway, because the running backs go wherever and are most
Yeah,
most of the time successful. Um, But let's get back into this. So I mean, uh, even though Williams had an off day technically, Roma Dunze caught 2 touchdowns. What was your reaction to at least his performance?
Yeah, I mean, I thought he looked good. Week after week, we see him and Caleb continuing to grow that connection. It's just like it's hard to be excited about much when the team is playing the way they are right
Yes,
now.
it is. Yes, it is. But I'm very happy that we have this duo for the next 4 years. Hopefully longer than that. But let's get into the next topic. Ever since Thomas Brown was named interim head coach, people were talking about the possibility of him becoming the full time head coach, us included. Yesterday's game was evident that we kind of rushed to that conclusion. An interim head coach is most likely all that he'll be, and personally, I am okay with that because the last time that a team hired a head coach or fired a head coach and then proceeded to name the interim head coach the full time head coach, it was Antonio Pierce, and that hire has not worked out very well for them. Uh, he will already have to rebuild his staff after 1 year if he doesn't get fired at the end of the year. And we will also get into more of that at the end of this episode. Yesterday proved that some offensive play callers do a better job in the booth rather than the sidelines. If this somehow reaches Ryan Poles, Kevin Warren, and George McCaskey, it is time to reach into your wallet to get the best offensive-minded head coach out there, and that's Ben Johnson. So I know you usually don't take fans' advice, but I think you should take fans' advice on this one. What are your thoughts on that, Jax?
Yeah, I don't have a ton to add. I think the fact that yesterday's game went how it did and we didn't see any bump in performance. Usually you see that little bump in performance from guys when you fire a coach that didn't seem like he was very well liked in the locker room. So I'm right there with you. I think it's great that Thomas Brown is getting this opportunity for his career, but he is not going to be the next Bears head coach. So I think that's something that luckily after one game we won't have to talk too much about, and we'll get to keep focusing on the future head coaching candidates that are elsewhere around the league.
Yes, yes. Um, so a lot of people have been calling for Ryan Poles' head because he has failed to invest high qualities of money on this offensive line and the defensive line. And we agree with you that that's a problem. But the problem with that is Kevin Warren already stated that Poles will stay on as GM for next season and be a crucial part of finding the next head coach for the Chicago Bears. I think it is too late to, and honestly kind of cruel for Warren to go back on his word now. There's also something that fans need to remember. When Poles was hired, Kevin Warren wasn't here, and Poles was given a list of people that the McCaskies liked during the interview process, and he was allowed to expand his search. But it was so late in the offseason that he didn't. This time will be different because he will be the one coming up with the candidates, so he will bring in the people that he likes, not the McCaskies. I don't think we clean house after what Warren said in the press conference last week, with them working in tandem to figure out the best course of action for the next head coach. I don't think Warren would say what he said at the begin and then at the beginning of the offseason say, thank you for the list, Ryan, but you are relieved of your duties. We're going to go in a different direction with your job as well. But I actually have some articles up here by Sports Mockery on my computer that I will share my screen and read to you guys real quick. I have two that I'm going to read, so let's get into it. So first off, let's start. The title of this one is Ryan Poles' seat is reportedly warmer than Bears are letting on, and it says that Kevin Warren insisted firing head coach Matt Eberflus was the only major decision the Chicago Bears would make going into the offseason. GM Ryan Poles was safe and would lead the charge on finding the next head coach. Most fans were okay with it, though some had some reservations about letting a general manager who whiffed so badly last time get another crack. However, the tone shifted dramatically after Sunday's game in San Francisco, even with Eberflus, the supposed source of all their problems, out of the picture. The team was thoroughly smacked around 38-13. This happened despite four of the 49ers' five best players being out with injury, with which was an
Indictment.
indictment on the roster. Bears players looked befuddled and often disinterested. Many fans on social media began directing their outrage at Poles, who built this thing from the ground up. The team is no closer to contention than it was 3 years ago. Forget the head coach. This organization may need a completely fresh start across the board. Some don't think the Bears will entertain this idea. That might not necessarily be true. A source informed SM, which is short for sports mockery, that the vibe inside Hallis Hall is tense. There is a feeling that more is riding on next week's game in Minnesota than letting on. Remember, Warren spent over a decade with that organization and helped build their stadium. Getting humiliated on primetime television against his former team may compel the team president to reevaluate the decision on to keep Poles. Don't forget that he wasn't around when the GM was hired. Well, they may work, or we may have a solid working relationship. There's no reason to maintain it if the team is trending towards the wrong direction. Nothing is set in stone. Ryan Poles won't be fired because of the loss in San Francisco. It will come down to how the team finishes out of the string. If they're crushed multiple times over the final month, it will be an indictment on the roster he put together in such an event. Warren may consider wiping the slate clean with a new GM and a new head coach. It may not be what the McCaskies wanted, but the reality is their handpicked guy hasn't gotten the job done. So that's the first story. Before we get into the second story, let me stop sharing here and ask you, Jack, what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I mean, it is natural that once Eberflus is gone, if things don't improve, you start looking to the next person to blame. And at this point, after shuffling through a lot of coaches, some blame, rightfully so, has to be placed on roster construction. I don't necessarily think Ryan Poles has done a terrible job of roster construction. There's obviously some miscues that he's had along the way.
Mm-hmm.
Not getting a first round pick back for Roquan Smith, giving up a early second, basically late first for Chase Claypool, trading away a day 3 pick for Ryan Bates. There's a list of things you can go on and on about, and there's also things you can compliment him for. To be honest with you, it's hard to say much without knowing what's going on in that building. Like, I can sit here from an outsider's perspective and be
Sure.
like, I think that Ryan Poles sucks and like he's making all the wrong decisions, but that might not be what Bears management thinks. So it's a moot point and they'll continue to move on. I just think that unless we hear anything different, I think Poles will be given his second chance and that there's not really going to be much that changes on that front.
And actually, the next story that I'm about to read, I think your points will prove warranted points. So let me share my screen again because I had to stop to get to the other one. So let me get to that one. So this story is called "Turns Out Those Growing Whispers About Kevin Warren Are True." And after watching the or wait, please. After watching the big press conference following the firing of head coach Matt Eberflus, people had assumptions. It felt like the power dynamic in House Hall had shifted. Team president Kevin Warren talked by far the most during the 20 minutes in front of the camera, while Ryan Poles looked reserved and downtrodden. And honestly, I think that most of it is because of the guy that he handpicked was failed, and also because his team is underperforming. Many took it as an indication that he's just had his power drastically reduced. Warren was the one calling the shots now. Despite the executive insisting polls still had final say on the upcoming coaching search, Brad Briggs of the Chicago Tribune dropped a big update on that front. It turns out that those assumptions were accurate. The Bears have already started contacting people to vet top coaching candidates. One thing has been made clear throughout the early process. Warren is the one calling the shots. Multiple sources indicate uh, the Bears have already started talking to people behind the scenes, laying the groundwork for future discussions with candidates they want to be part of the process. Um, Warren made it clear that at least behind the scenes, he'll be leading the charge to hire the next coach. Poles will be the point man in the operation, but Warren has all the juice, and he made sure everyone is aware. Um, this isn't a surprise, or at least it shouldn't be. Warren didn't leave his job as Big Ten commissioner to take a back seat behind Poles in Chicago. He was hired to run the franchise. Uh, a lot of people don't like that. They consider him nothing more than a lawyer trying to act like he knows how to run a sports franchise. Well, like it or not, he's at least has far more experience than Ted Phillips did when he took over in 1999. Kevin Warren doesn't care about optics at this point. He's trying to fix the mess that this organization has been stuck in for 40 years. If that means he has to throw his weight around and shake things up, so be it. There is no telling if it will work well or not. But it's better than going with the same routine. Don't forget that both Eberflus and Poles were McCaskey hires. Warren had no say in either of them. One can honestly say he was more patient with them than other presidents might have been, choosing to let them try to build on their improvement from last season, and it hasn't happened yet. So let me stop sharing. Oh wait. Um, so Kevin,
I think we. Oh, sorry.
I mean, we've probably said everything that we need to say, so I'm going to stop sharing. But what are your thoughts on from your comments from the last article going into this article? Do you think that your statement before that about Poles getting his second shot is still warranted?
Yeah, I mean, it seems like he's just gonna have the little kitty gloves on this time when he does it. All
But honestly, that's kind of good. That might be a good thing because if someone is helping him with this that has so much experience in Kevin Warren, maybe this means that this time polls will get the higher rate.
I hope so. I
That's
mean,
that's what I'm hoping for.
the definition of insanity is doing the same thing over and over again. So to that article's point, like you do have to try and do something different at a certain point. So if Kevin Warren thinks that the best idea is for him to get more involved, then go for it. And if it doesn't work, then we'll reevaluate. But you got to at least try something different. So I definitely agree with that point.
Yeah, I mean, it's gonna be a different off season. It's gonna be it might be a weird one. It might be I mean we might know our head coach very fast. We might know our head coach last. Which honestly, I'm kind of hoping that we know it last because that means that Ben Johnson was the choice, or at least if he isn't, I hope that we hire someone you know around the playoff time, because that means that we are hiring a coach that was in the playoffs, which is which means that they're a successful coordinator, which is what we need as a head coach to bring in or to further Caleb Williams' talents. But next, we're going to go into our MVP and Coach of the Year. And I mean, I put that I hope that me and Jack disagree on one of these topics, so we can go into more about them. But we kind of agreed on the MVP. What we disagreed on actually was the one that I thought we'd agree on, which was Coach of the Year. But so for me, my MVP favorite is Saquon Barkley. This should be no surprise. This should be a surprise to no one because after Barkley joined the Eagles, everyone knew that he was going to go off behind that offensive line. And let us say this: the Bears should take a page out of their playbook when it comes to building an offensive line. I think Barkley could break um, uh, Eric Dickerson's single season rushing record of 105 yards in 1984. Right now, Barkley has 1,623 and is on pace for 2,125. That should be enough to give Barkley MVP. Now I know that MVP is prominently a QB type of award. So I'll also give a QB prediction, and my choice would be Josh Allen because I know that Patrick Mahomes has an 11-1 record, or wait, no, 12-1 record now, right?
Mm-hmm. I
But
believe so.
but he ain't playing like a 12-1 quarterback. So that I mean, his defense is the one that's actually helping him win the games, and actually it's kind of special teams as well because they've gotten lucky with blocked kicks and and double doink uh, field goals and all that kind of stuff. So what about you, Jack? Who would be your MVP favorite?
Yeah, I think if I had to decide right now, it would definitely be between Lamar Jackson and Josh Allen, and I would have to lean Josh Allen just because of the slightly better record. Both quarterbacks having very similar seasons, but Josh Allen right now, 32 total touchdowns to only 5 interceptions. Obviously, just went absolutely insane last night with 6 total touchdowns, even in a loss to the Rams. But hey,
Mm-hmm.
the Rams are a good team, especially when you play them in LA. So I don't really blame Josh Allen for that loss at all, especially when you put up 42 points in the game. So, I mean, Lamar Jackson was very much the heavy favorite earlier this year, but we've seen the Ravens scuffle a little bit in recent weeks, and they haven't been as good as they were either of the last 2 times Lamar Jackson has won MVP. So I think this is finally the year that the voters give it to Josh Allen, just because he's been knocking at the door for the last, I want to say, 3 to 4 years, to be honest with you.
Yeah, and honestly, he's accomplished quite a bit this season. Outside of football, also he's gotten engaged to Haley Steinfeld. I know that you might not know that, but I just think that's kind of he's probably going to get an AFC championship ring, so he might get 2 rings this year. Um,
Let's see about that.
but what's next?
Head
So,
coach of the year.
oh yeah, coach. So I thought that actually me and Jack would agree on this. We actually disagreed on it. Coach of the year, for me, and probably most of the world is Dan Campbell. He has built the Lions to be an offensive juggernaut, and he's a leader of men type of coach, and we are hoping that quality has rubbed off on offensive coordinator Ben Johnson, who all Bears fans hope he is the choice for next Bears head coach. And I would assume with how long Ben Johnson has been with Dan Campbell that some of it has to rub off on him. But what are your thoughts on that? And then what's your coach of the year candidate?
Yeah, so I don't think you can go wrong with Dan Campbell at all. Obviously, the Lions are most likely the best team in the NFL this year.
Hmm.
I just have a very not a different philosophy. My philosophy for coach of the year usually is I think whoever has the best season uh, for a team that I didn't think was going to be good is my personal coach of the year candidate. So for this year, I would have to give it to Jim Harbaugh. I saw the Chargers as maybe like a 5-win team going into this year. I didn't think they had anywhere near enough talent at receiver to compete. I didn't like their running back room. J.K. Dobbins is so injury prone. Gus Edwards is old. Herbert was coming off a year in which he had a pretty significant rib injury and didn't play as great. And the defense was, despite the talent, pretty awful last year. And then in comes Jim Harbaugh, and all of a sudden they are 8-5 now after the loss to Kansas City last night. But they honestly could have taken both games from Kansas City this year and been around a 10-win team.
They
And
should have.
I think that as long as the Chargers end up making the playoffs, which is definitely not a guarantee because both leagues right now are very tight near the top, I think
Mhm.
it would. I would be hard pressed as a voter not to give it to Jim Harbaugh just because of the vast turnaround. Where I think the Chargers roster may have gotten worse and their record's gotten better after 1 year of him being there.
You know what? You know what? I have no problem with both of our choices. They're both great choices. It definitely took longer for Dan Campbell to build his roster, but now that he has, the last
Yeah,
2 years they've been very good. Like
yeah,
they
and
were.
it would be a shame if Dan Campbell doesn't get any coaches of the year out of this rebuild of the Lions. So I do kind of hope he gets it, but yeah, that's just my two cents.
Again, both great choices for us. I mean, I wouldn't be mad at either. So our final topic before we head off tonight or today, we're going to talk about how many head coaching or jobs will be open at the beginning of the off season. So right now there are three: the Bears, the Saints, and the Jets. There are usually 5 to 7 head coaching openings at the beginning of the offseason, but I think we could see 8 to 9. This year. There are already three with the three I mentioned earlier. Uh, the Giants should honestly just clean house and start over because they have not done anything aside from the first year of Brian Dable's tenure as head coach there. And honestly, I thought after that year the Giants were going to be great, but they have gone downhill since then, and they need a quarterback. They need so much. Um, the next for me is the Raiders. Uh, will most likely fire Antonio Pierce. And let me be honest, I was a fan of this hire last offseason, but Pierce has only been a position coach before he's never been like a DC before becoming a head coach. And usually you don't leapfrog a coordinator position before you become a head coach. Uh, the Jaguars will 100% get rid of Doug Peterson after most likely securing the number one overall draft pick in the 2025 NFL draft. Uh, with the Bengals struggling, unless they figure out uh, their their their
Stuff.
crap, their stuff in the next 4 weeks, Zach Taylor may be looking for a new job elsewhere, and I personally think that that's going to be a coordinator job, not a head coach job. But who knows? Maybe a team thinks that he's good enough to be a head coach again. Um, the the Cleveland Browns may look to move on from Kevin Stefanski with his record being 3-10 this year, and it is all because of Deshaun Watson's injury. And I knew that giving him that contract was a bad idea. Uh, my final prediction for who should be looking for their next head coach is the Dallas Cowboys. In fact, I think they need to look for a whole new GM also. But the problem with that is Jerry Jones, their owner, is the GM, and with him being owner, he's not going to give up GM duties until he's in the ground. Sadly. Um, but what are your thoughts about the jobs that I mentioned? Like, would you add any or would you switch any?
Yeah, I was actually just going to say, I think you did a really good job putting this list together. I was trying to rack my brain and just go through all the head coaches in the league and think of any others that weren't on this list that might be a little bit of job security worries. The only two I could really even think of remotely, and I don't think they'll be fired, are potentially Shane Steichen after 2 years in Indianapolis. Not a whole lot of success, but like I said, I don't think
I
so.
don't think he's had enough. I think a coach needs 3 years to show that
Yeah,
he's well enough. And I mean, you, they drafted Anthony Richardson last year, right?
yeah, correct,
Not two
correct.
years ago, right?
Well, this is his second pro season, but he only played 2 games his rookie year because he had
Right.
the
So
AC joint injury.
you can't really say that
Yeah,
first year is fair.
the only reason I brought it up is because of like kind of the quarterback stuff we've been seeing going on there. Like I think it's been handled a little bit messy, and I don't know if they're
No,
gonna like
absolutely,
yeah. But then
absolutely.
the other name I was gonna mention, who I don't think will be fired at all, but I think in the next couple of years we'll have to start talking about it, is Mike McDaniel with Miami. Obviously,
Mhm.
they dealt with missing Tua for a lot of this year, but
Right.
I mean, it's we've missed Tua a couple games each of the last couple of years, and each year, I mean, the Dolphins just look horrendous when Tua's not in the game. And you'd think if you had a good coach like McDaniel, as he's regarded, would figure out a way to win one of these games, but like it never happens. So I think if the Dolphins end up squeaking in the playoffs and don't have a lot of success again, I think the conversations might start going on with McDaniel. And then the only one on your list that I think will keep his job for one more year is Kevin Stefanski. I think just this year
Oh
is a
wow.
shitstorm.
I actually thought you would say Mike
No,
McCarthy.
no, I think Stefanski is the one that hangs around for another year.
It's funny. It's funny. He is actually. I read some articles from Sports Mockery also that that they think that because there was a guy Mike Florio mentioned some names that he thinks the Bears could trade for in coaches. Now we don't think that's going to happen because we have to give up too much unless we were to trade for
Andy
Stefan.
Reid.
Well, so it's fun. It's funny. People think that the name. So one coach called them up and said, "Why wasn't I on that list?" And a lot of people think that it's actually Kevin Stefanski. Um,
No.
Now I don't know. I didn't know that
Yeah.
he was actually an offensive minded coach. I thought he was a
Mm.
defensive minded coach. I mean, does he call plays for?
He called plays up until I think about week 8 or 9 of this year when he gave it over to Ken Dorsey. But
Oh,
he called plays all of last year when he won Coach of the Year.
and he does have two of them. He actually has 2 years in
Yes, he
coach of the
does have
year.
2 Coach of the
So
Years.
that would be impressive for a resume if he was fired. But again, I mean, I was just looking at teams that had bad records. I mean, or
I mean, that's
teams
usually
that
the best way to go about it, to be honest with
or
you.
teams that just look to be in total dumpsters. It's
Hmm.
and everyone on the list that I mentioned was so. Um, but I think that's going to be our podcast for you guys today. We're gonna figure out when we're gonna record the post game episode for you guys because Jack has finals and of course that takes precedent over this stuff. So we'll figure that out. But we hope that you guys enjoyed this episode, and we will see you Saturday for our normal pregame. Even though the game's on Monday, I'm not gonna record on Sunday because it's just. I mean, my family's doing Christmas on Sunday, so we're gonna be doing stuff. So we'll figure all that stuff out off camera, and you will see us next week on Saturday. Have a good week, everybody.
Have a good week, guys.